Negative thought form entities. Now, negative thought form entities are the most common entities found on people, and most people who are not conscious of their thoughts have many of these things. Some people can have up to 15 if they've been in a negative state for a long time. If someone had more than 20, that would mean that they would be really, really unhealthy and have a lot of disease and illness going on. But most people, I would say, have around 5 to 10. Up to 15 is quite common if they are quite a negative person. But once somebody gets up to 20 and more, they'll really start to have a lot of health issues and a lot of kind of diseases going on. Thoughts create things and hold massive amount of power. And if we choose to think something over and over again, these thoughts can take on form. Now, depending on what spectrum of the light these thoughts are from, determines the outcome of the form created. So it's up to us what we create with our mind, but thoughts create things. And if our thoughts are negative, it's going to create negative things. And one of those negative things could actually be birthing a negative thought form entity. When negative thoughts are repeated, they can turn into negative thought form entity, which will then detach itself from you and become an independent thought form entity. And then it will reattach itself to you and program you with the same program that you created it with. Now, I find that absolutely amazing. But like I said, they're also one of the most common things, because as you can see, if it's just about repeating thoughts over and over and over again, that we can create things. And if negative thoughts are created over and over and over again, we're going to constantly be feeding our energy body this negative energy. Now, when this negative energy gets to a certain size, it will actually start to clump together and create form. And this is how independent thought form entities are created. We birth them into reality, and then they just kind of attach themselves back to us, and like I said, they'll start to program us with the same program we created it with. Now, this makes it hard to get out of the loop of the negative thoughts, and you keep creating food for it. So it's kind of like, you're thinking negative thoughts, and you think them over and over and over and over again until you basically birth this entity, and then it will attach itself to you and feed you the same program that you created it with. And then all of a sudden you have a feedback loop where you won't be able to get out of that funk of those negative thought forms as easily, because now something is actually feeding them back into you. You're feeding them back into it, which creates it to be more powerful, and then it creates more programming in you, and that loop cycle continues. So these feedback loops are really, really common in people. And you can imagine if you've got like 5, 10 negative thought form entities, operating, it'd be really hard to get yourself out of a negative vibration and negative thoughts. So these things definitely create a feedback loop that makes it really hard for people to break that cycle and move forward. Now, these things can take on any shape and form, and if you're the one that's birthed them, then they know you and your shadow aspects very, very well, because this is where they like to hang out most of the time. They'll hang out in your shadow, and back in that shadow, they start to know you very, very well, and they will start to use your weaknesses and blind spots and trigger us to create certain emotions and thoughts that will then feed them. So they like to know your shit. They will get into your shadows and they will start playing around in the back there and start figuring out and tweaking what triggers you. So they really do love to play with our shadow. Once they're not being fed with the same energy or vibration, it's no longer a match, and it will go and find another person that holds a similar program or vibration to attach to. We can burn these things off by changing our vibrational state and mindset. And this is kind of what happens when we fall in love. When someone falls in love, it's the most common example I can give you of actually changing your vibrational state so quickly it burns these things off. So let's just say someone's quite depressed because they've been single for a long time, and they've created and birthed some negative thought forms around nobody loves me type, thoughts. Now, they might meet someone and all of a sudden connect on this high love zone, and instantly their vibration goes from a very low vibration to a very, very high vibration. Love can snap you out of any vibration very, very quickly. So, someone's been depressed and at home, and then all of a sudden they, find someone they have this amazing connection with. It snaps them into a high vibration, and all of a sudden they just throw off all the entities. Like, all their thought form entities will all of a sudden just be burnt off, because that vibration is so high and pure that these entities can't stay attached. So love can actually just smash these things out of our energy zone just by instantly changing our vibration. They usually hang around the home for as long as possible because they know that people can change their vibrational states very quickly, and that some vibrational states like love is very short-lived because they don't truly embody that vibration, and it usually end up going up very quickly and coming down very quickly as well. And these entities know that. So they will try and hang around for a little bit. If someone falls in love and all of a sudden their vibration goes up and they get forced out of that person's energy vibration, then they might hang around for a little bit because they might be waiting to see if that tone and vibration drops. Now, if it doesn't drop, and the person stays in that high vibe, then it has to go and attach somewhere else. But if that person's vibration has started to drop quite quickly because all of a sudden they're, worried about what they look like, or self-doubts come in, or lack of self-love and respect has made them to feel not worthy of this new love that's come in, that can drop their vibration down quite quickly, and these things will just attach again. So it depends on the person, how quickly and how long they can hold that high vibration, if these things will burn off for good. Sometimes it will just be throwing them off for a few days before their vibration goes down low enough for that to attach again. So if the person has managed to get into a high vibration and they are able to actually hold that high vibration for at least a good week or more, the chances are the negative thought form entity won't hang around that long and will go looking for somebody else. The attaching mechanisms, well, if it's not their own negative thought form entity that they've birthed themselves, because that's obviously the attaching mechanism is if you've created it, but if it's not yours, then holding a similar vibration to the one that it was created with is the attaching mechanism. So if a negative thought form entity was created out of depression, then it would be looking for the vibration in someone as the attaching mechanism. But the person does not have to be in the depressed state in order for it to attach. They just have to still hold that vibrational spectrum or that vibration within their energetic matrix in order for it to attach. So it doesn't have to be a state that is still that the person is in right now. So the person doesn't have to be depressed right now. It just means if the person still holds aspects of themselves in a vibrational space, they haven't healed those parts, that still could be enough for the negative thought form entity to attach to that person, because that entity will feel that that person still holds that vibration within their vibrational spectrum. So it's still permission. So this is the reason why, healing as much as we can our internal wounds is the best thing, because that way we're actually clearing up the attaching mechanisms that can be hiding within us. Now, the results in a person. If they've created the entity themselves, then they already know this energy well and they won't even feel much difference. Most people have no idea these things are operating because they've birthed them themselves. Now, most people have a lot of these attached and create new ones regularly. It takes a decent level of consciousness and mindfulness to get away from birthing these things. This time-space reality is full of them. Now, if it's not the one that they created themselves, they may actually feel slightly different when these things attach. I've had people come to me after going out to a place or an event, and after being there for a little while, they've felt a different vibration come over them. Sometimes I've worked with people who have been so aware enough that they've been able to describe the feeling of having something attach and then try and bring up old vibrational states to the surface. Like being happy one minute and then the next feeling like something has attached, and then all of a sudden they start thinking of all the times in their life when they were depressed or when certain things started to happen. So all of a sudden they start to feel all these old feelings and emotions triggered. Now usually either throwing it off with a good energetic shake off can be enough at that point. If someone's aware enough, they can shake that thing straight off instantly. But if it's left attached, they can manage to sometimes get themselves to a point where they start to separate themselves from the attachment, and they can then, you know, start to see that that's not them, and they can actually start to feel that something's attached and it's creating this kind of issue in them. And if they're aware enough, they can actually kind of separate themselves enough from this attachment to start to see that it actually is an entity. So some people are at that point of awareness. Now, this is the time when they start to make appointments for someone like me, because I've had lots of people come to me and say, I think I have something going on and attached because I can feel it. I've managed to kind of untether myself enough from it to recognize that it's not me, and I just need some help. Now at this point I'm always blown away, number one, that someone has the ability to kind of feel that and to tether themselves from it to know that it's not them. So, you know, more and more people are definitely coming up to this level of consciousness. So you might find that people seek you out who are at this level of consciousness and at this point of awareness, where they will start to feel themselves and feel what's not theirs, and they will start to seek people like you and me out for this type of work. But this takes a very in tune person to be at the state of awareness, and that's why I'm so grateful for many years of experience doing hands-on healing, where I got to really look and understand this energy, and I've got to feel it, taste it, see what it looks like, see what it moves like, see what it acts like. And that's kind of, you know, the training I needed to be able to fine-tune myself into feeling these energies around. These things can hide really, really well, but they can't hibernate. But they can be attached for lifetimes if they are still a vibrational match to its creator and still being fed. Now, the most recent example that can illustrate a negative thought form entity was, I had a friend come over and she had plans to go somewhere else later on. So we only had a small amount of time. We had like 2 hours before she was meant to go on to her next, you know, kind of prearranged thing. And it was a pretty important thing she was meant to be going to. So over the hours that she was at my house, we were having really some massive, deep conversations. And, you know, we kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And we were like kind of digging up some sort of old belief patterns within her, and we were talking about, you know, stuff that was going really, really deep down into some of her stuff. And, you know, there was lots of shifting going on, and I could see that her energy body was doing a lot of shifting. And then as it was getting time for her to leave, there was kind of this sort of energy that started to kind of come up, and I said to her, wow, you know, like there's a really like heavy energy, and she was really feeling it too. It was like such a heavy energy that had come up, and I could feel the whole energetic grid was just changed. It was all of a sudden just like this really heavy, where it was like, oh, I felt like I need to go and lay down, I've had enough. And she was like, wow, I don't know if I can like go on to this appointment. And I said to her, I actually feel like this is something, you know, this is, and we started to speak about the heaviness and the energy in the grid. And as we were doing that, it was like getting heavier and heavier, and I was like, oh, I just feel like you need to get on the table, like you need to get on the table. And she felt that too. But then there was another part of her that was like, oh, but I have to go to this thing. And she was having this inner battle. but I have to go here, but I feel like I need to do this, but I have to do this, but I need to do this. And it was this like inner battle. And I said to her, oh my gosh, and this went on for a while. And I said, it's like, I can see the battle in you. And she was like totally aware of the battle. And there was this like, and she was having to really fight the inner fight. So she made the decision to not go. She made the message, got on the table, and the whole time there was like this energy that was like kind of trying to make it so difficult for us to get her on the table. There was so much kind of going on, and so we finally got her on the table. And once I kind of opened her energy body and stuff and kind of went in, all of a sudden I was going deep down into her brain, and I was on the inside world of her brain. Okay, so there's a whole universe inside of there, and I was going so deep. And once I kind of got to this point, I could feel this electric spark, and the heaviness that I was feeling in the grid I got it, I anchored it. And as I was kind of pulling it up, it first took on the resemblance of a demon or a devil. It kind of had like this energy that I first thought, okay, it's like, this is what I'm dealing with. But once we actually got it out and removed it, and it was just such a different energy. It was a clearer energy, even though her energy body was still having to filter out the heaviness. There was a different energy in the grid. And what I recognized once I kind of removed this thing, it was like, oh, it looked like a demon or a devil. It had the resemblance, and it had the same kind of structure in a way, but it wasn't. It was actually a negative thought form entity that had been there and been attached for so many lifetimes. And the reason it took on the energetic form of like a demon or a devil type energy was because this person's negative thought form entity created lifetimes ago was this inner critic. It was the inner critic that was so like just so criticizing that, and over lifetimes it had taken on like an inner demon or an inner devil. So it kind of started to take on the formation of that, but the truth of the energy behind it was still a negative thought form. So the reason why I brought this story out was I just want to kind of show you that negative thought form entities look so different. They will take on form and structures of different looks depending on what it was created with. So this particular negative thought form entity, because it was so critical of her inner world, this thing had taken on the form of looking like an inner demon or inner devil, because it was just, that was its purpose. Its purpose was to be that critical and that nasty, within her own world. So negative thought forms can take on so many different appearances, but what makes them a negative thought form entity is that it was created from thoughts first as just thought patterns, and then turned into an independent thought form entity. So no matter what it looks like, if it was created through the mind of somebody, it's a negative thought form entity. So that's kind of the reason why I wanted to use that example, because it's very easy if we could just see entities. If you have the vision, if you have vision as one of your gifts, you may think that there's so many different types of entities because they can look so different. But the majority of them, the majority that we find on people, like 80% of the time, even if they all look different, they'll still be all negative thought form entities. So it's not about what they look like, it's how they were created that makes them classified as whatever they are. So negative thought form entities can look so different from each other depending on how they were created, but if they were birthed through the mind, they're still considered and classified as a negative thought form entity. So basically there can be so many different types of different looking negative thought form entities, but underneath it always comes back to the core that if they were birthed from negative thoughts, they are classified a negative thought form entity regardless of what they look like. It's only if that thought form entity has been upheld for such a long time by the collective consciousness that it can solidify into a solid form like a devil or demon, that they are then classified as something different because it's gained a denser form and no longer needs the belief in it to hold its shape and form. Where negative thought forms entities disappear and break up into particles if it's something hasn't upheld its existence. So remembering when we talk about demons and devils, they actually started as negative thought form entities, but they were upheld so much from the collective consciousness, they were solidified. So now the devil and demon entities, they're actually solidified in this dimensional form, which means they don't need the same energy to survive anymore. They've gained so much power that they've solidified themselves into existence. So unlike a negative thought form entity, if a demon or devil energy is not upheld from the collective consciousness, these things are still able to roam because they're solidified. We've given them so much energy. They are now a different classification. Now, negative thought form entities normally, if they're not fed from the collective consciousness or they're not fed from individual consciousness, they will break up into particles and dissipate over time. But if they are upheld for a very long time, if they are solidified into our consciousness, like the devils and demon entities have, if they're upheld to that level for so long, then that's when they literally can change their classification and no longer an independent thought form entity because they've solidified themselves into existence and classified differently. So these negative thought form entities, they can hide, but they can't actually hibernate. But they can be attached to someone for lifetimes if that negative thought form entity is still being upheld and fed at some level by the person. So it still needs to be a vibrational match to its creator and still being fed to be attached for lifetimes. But it won't be hibernating. When they hibernate, it means they don't need to be fed. So these negative thought form entities always have to be fed, so they are not able to hibernate. But like I said, they can hide for lifetimes, like the example I used. They can be hiding deep down. So they're not able to actually hibernate. But like I said, they can hide for lifetimes as long as they're a vibrational match to the creator and they're still being fed. Now, if it's not the original person that created the negative thought form entity, this negative thought form entity, if it's attached to somebody who didn't birth it, but is a vibrational match, and it gets fed, then that entity, that negative thought form entity, can still attach to that person for lifetimes, even though it wasn't the original creator. As long as it's still a vibrational match and being fed, it can still attach for lifetimes. These things will not leave us until they're starved and not being fed anymore or cleared properly. Now, these are definitely the most common form of entity that most people have attached to them. Most people, it's very, very rare that I'll find somebody who hasn't got a negative thought form entity attached to them, except for when their soul vibration starts to get higher. When you start to work for clients with a higher soul vibration, it does mean that they've done a lot more inner cleanup, which has allowed them to raise their vibration. So if you're working with very high vibrational clients, you might find that this is less of a thing because they would have already started to clear up their vibration. But because they can hide for lifetimes, what usually happens if you're working with higher vibrational clients, they might not have negative thought form entities attached to them sometimes, but because of the inner work they're doing, sometimes they can uncover a layer, which then a negative thought form entity that maybe has been attached for a very long time but just buried down deep, they can start to come up. And if you have conscious clients with high vibrations, doing the inner work, all of a sudden have one of these come up, they can start to question why. But this is why it's important for us to really educate people that these things can actually stay hiding for very, very deep within our system for a very long time. And it's only when we start uncovering the different layers and pulling it back that sometimes they can come up to be presented. So, you know, high vibrational beings, conscious people who do the inner work, clean up these things a lot, but they still will have them come up for clearing once in a while when another layer has been uncovered. Because like I said, you know, most people have a lot of these things attached after lifetimes and lifetimes of birth in them.